Hello, in this video you'll learn how to invoke stored procedures and functions from PostgreSQL in C# in .NET 10 in this case. Of course, earlier versions will vary, and at some point earlier versions didn't really support stored procedures. So this is a relatively new thing. Well, they were sort of introduced in 2018, so it's not that new, but this is all based on the previous video we had here in comparing essentially stored procedures and functions in PostgreSQL. Just straightforward, no C#, no any other language, just PostgreSQL in DB setup for editing everything, and we kind of look at differences, why stored procedures were introduced and all that. But if we go to NuGet packages in .NET 10 and in Visual Studio here, all we need to do is install Npgsql. And this is not Entity Framework Call. If you want to learn more about that, you can look at the previous videos, very recent ones here on this channel. We cover everything from migrations, the basic migrations, the basic setups, to full text search and different types or custom types, all kinds of great things that you can do with PostgreSQL. Now, let's get into the code, and let's first start with functions, and then we'll see how stored procedures work as well alongside all those functions. Now, in the code, we just have a simple program.cs. We don't need, as an example for something like this, a whole API arrangement. We're not going to be injecting any database factories, any database contexts, because this is a very simple arrangement, and that's what it is used for. Some people like it, some people don't, some people have to use it. That's just how it goes with these things. But let's get started with a very simple, straightforward thing, a very simple function that we used in the previous video. Again, we're not going to really look into the functions, very straightforward. We essentially have accounts table, and we check the balance of the account. That's all there is to it. But we do need to pass the parameter, we do need to get a return, so there's something to do with that. And let's start with await using. And let's do await using a variable, because we do have above the little connection string. As a string, we need to create a connection or a data source, sort of to be more precise in the wording. We have new Npgsql data source, not a connection. We already have a connection. Npgsql data source, like that. And that takes the connection string, and we have a little connection string here. We can actually move above. And something to mention as well, this is of course just the default, and probably the security we kind of cover in some of the other videos. So you should never, of course, have a simple password in this thing, and if you use a Docker, it's not going to be localhost even on your local arrangement, or sometimes it will, sometimes it won't, depending on your firewall restrictions. But of course, every time with databases, we always say that you have to have a bit more protection than just the password. So you have to, at the very least, lock your IP addresses, which IP can access, which IP cannot, because the password is sort of useful, but really, if you use IP restrictions, it's a lot better than having a password. You will have a password, of course, but it's a lot better than that. It's the main thing that will actually secure your system, something to never forget. But in terms of usings, we have Npgsql right here, and then we create this data source right here. Now it's throwing a bit of an error here. Let's see what we have. It's not going to be new. Actually, it's not new. It is create. These autocorrects, modern ones, if you will, they can be useful. They can be a bit annoying. Depends on how you look at it. In general, they're probably more useful than annoying, but you can always turn them off. So let's do await now, and then using, And then we will wrap it like this, and we'll create a little CMD. We're not using command, we're old school. Command is for beginners, CMD is for professionals, as they used to say. But let's do data source, let's do create command. And as you can see, we're not constructing new classes. So if you have to absolutely remember the syntax, we are not constructing. We are just using a method from this class right here. So create command, and the command in this case will be quite interesting, but that's, I believe we need to open it up. We don't need to close it here. We need to open it up like that so we don't see an error, because the command is actually quite interesting here. We do have account balance function, but in order to call a function from C#, .NET, we don't necessarily use type function, because for stored procedure, we will use type stored procedure rather. For function, essentially what we are doing, we're just writing SQL syntax. There's nothing more than that, because functions, they have to be called like that. And I believe we have a little suggestion here which will work. We're not going to take the next one. We'll go through it bit by bit, but we can look at this and you can see we have select and we have account balance. And then in none of the next steps for this function, we will have anything to do with the command type, because by default, the command type is text, which is just a simple query, right? A simple raw query, which you should always be careful with. Of course, it doesn't matter, it doesn't hurt, it's bad practice to always have them. That's why it's preferred to have stored procedure. Because here you write select, and maybe, who knows, someone else will come and they'll write select where, and then you'll have inline queries in your C# code. Oh, that's unbecoming. We don't want that. We want stored procedures. We want clear separation of code. So let's do here CMD. Parameters, add with value. Actually, we're not going to add with value because there's no point here. Well, there is probably some, and you can certainly do that, but let's do new and value 1 like that. And we're not adding with value. We don't want that. Let's skip that part like this. I believe that should, yeah, of course not. That's going to be add, simple add. We'll actually use add with value later on with other parts, so it will be interesting to compare. But essentially, value, add value, however many you add, you have number 1, number 2, number 3. They are naming functions as well, not just stored procedures, so you can do one or the other. Just something to mention. And then we have variable balance, and let's see what we can do with that. As an equal sign. We need right away a little cast, because the result will be the result, and the result is actually await ExecuteScalarAsync. If you are familiar with SQL Server, it's going to be exactly the same. Now, functions, procedures, differences between them, a few differences of course, but we have scalar, we have non-query, and then we have readers and all those things. It's exactly the same arrangement essentially as AddNet. In most ways, at least. If you know how to use AddNet, there's nothing to be afraid of if you have to use PostgreSQL. It's almost the same, really. And we can also just do a little console write line or something, just kind of show it off. And let's just do something simple. Balance. Let's do like this properly, right? We're not using C#5, we're using C#14. So let's make it a bit better. And let's say balance like that. Yeah. So now it's going to be displayed properly. And this is how you go about using functions. PostgreSQL functions. Account balance, select. So essentially, again, you're just writing a query because you cannot execute a function, essentially. In PostgreSQL, it's not execute. In SQL Server, it is exec. In PostgreSQL, it's call. But the idea is still the same. Use keyword exec or use keyword call. to do that action, to execute essentially on it. Here, same thing, you just have to use the text to actually use it. So that's why it's for the code separation purposes and all those things, and just in general for a cleaner arrangement, it's probably better to use procedures if you are going to call them from the actual code, your .NET code. Now then, let's move on to the stored procedures. Very similar arrangement, and again, we use these await usings just so we dispose of everything, so we don't have to create command, maybe flush it out. Obviously, with connections, you have your connection set up, data source, so you use await using variable, and you could wrap everything into it as well. So you don't have to close it and dispose of it. It will do it automatically. That's why we're using await using. That's the only reason why we do that. But it is a good practice both in SQL Server and in PostgreSQL. So something to remember. Now, again, await using, and we'll do a little command here. Once again, we're not going to use a full word because we are professionals. We've been doing this for years. We always use command, well, CMD rather, not command the full word. That's how it goes. It's perhaps a bit of a secret for some people these days, but that's how we do it. So create command, like that. Another command. It's like text for the stored procedure in SQL Server, but it's going to be the same sort of an arrangement here as well. So let's close it like that. Let's open up so we don't see any errors. We have data source create command. At this point, still almost, well, exactly the same as function. But now, instead of select, we will simply declare the stored procedure that we want to use. So it's going to be apply monthly, let's see, monthly interest. And I do have this written down on the other screen. It's not like I remember all of them. And you should always reference when you actually write them down, copy and paste, best case scenario, because of course, this isn't create command. Visual Studio won't see your error, your typo, and who knows, perhaps the typo is on the database side. So it's very important if you can copy and paste it so it's clear, so you don't get weird errors. Maybe it's down the line of some pipeline of things that going on. Well, it's easy to make that mistake, so better copy and paste and be sure that it is exactly what you want to execute. And then we have CMD parameters. In this case, we'll add with value. And again, if you ever use the SQL Server, it's very familiar. And it's basically exactly the same thing. So we name the parameter. It's going to be a rate in this case. And then we use the value. Let's do 100M. Little decimal here for the 100. And that's it. We have a value. And we have the name for the value. Going to be the parameter that's actually declared by the name. We just used a bit of a different approach, and you can actually use that with procedures as well. But this is more accurate. So now let's do CMD, command type. That's the main difference, really. It's not how you provide the parameters, it's none of that. Of course, here there's no select, right? You just name it. But then you have to change it to command type stored procedure. Let's see if we can do that. Stored procedure, where is it? Command type stored procedure, like that. So now it's not text, because by default, if we look at it, the previous one, it was text. And text is just basic query, so you can write anything you want. Of course, if you do that, if you must do that for whatever reason, you should never do that. It's very inappropriate and offensive for most people even. But if you ever do that, you should at least, like we have here, use variables or parameters, as I should say. And here again, command type procedure. That's all we want. And then couple lines down, await cmd execute non-query async, because it is non-query. We don't return anything. We could return something, of course, with stored procedures. We could have a reader and all that stuff. But in this case, we just set something, update, insert, and forget, and we're good to go. So if this succeeds, and of course, you have the same return type integer right here, just like you would have in SQL Server, so you can see how many rows were affected. That's the only thing you can add from non-query async, because we're not querying anything, so we just get that sort of a result. And again, if you're interested in .NET PostgreSQL, take a look at the previous videos. We have everything from basic stuff, from different custom types, how you can store enums instead of just encoding them as integers, full text search, and soon we'll have some RAG arrangements. If you want to get into a bit of AI in .NET, we do have a video on that, very straightforward stuff with the use of agent AI arrangement, how you can call that. In the future, we'll have a few videos on RAG arrangements with PostgreSQL, because you can have that vectorization there as well, quite an interesting topic. And with that said, we will conclude this video.